80 years ago, a small revolution began. Quebec workers started their first struggles for workplace health and safety. At the Dosco rolling mill in Montreal, filthy working conditions and 60-hour work weeks led the steelworkers to stand up and speak out. They started a 7-week-long strike that resulted in bettering their working conditions. Facing poor working conditions at Stelco Notre Dame, workers chose, in 1951, to equip themselves with a mighty union, set on improving their fate, a United Steelworkers Union. Quickly, the steelworkers made their marks. They launched a series of new initiatives, a class on silicosis prevention, information evenings, a manual on workplace accidents, and the very first report on how crucial prevention is. This emerging movement faced years of adversity under Duplessis' Great Darkness. In 1952, 4,000 Quebec mine workers defied the padlock law, which restricted union activities. They decided to unionize. This is where the real union revolution started. Murdochville symbolizes the very essence of our struggle for the right to organize and for occupational health and safety. Despite the firing of many strikers in 1957, including their presidents, Duplessis' police crackdown, scabs, goons, batons, a hail of rocks, and the torching of their local, the steelworkers stood firm and finally prevailed in 1966. Driven by this movement, unionized miners rallied throughout the struggles of the 60s. After a short, fierce strike, miners at East Malartic and Barnett mines spawned the first joint health and safety committees. A historic union win. In 1960, Montreal was the scene of 5 days dedicated to workplace safety. Steelworkers kept on teaching and spreading the word. In only 5 years, the steelworkers became the leading voice of health and safety in Quebec. From 60 to 65, they brought forward 27 resolutions to the FTQ convention. Also in 1960, an arbitrator's decision produced a thunderous echo at Campbell-Chibougamau and all over Quebec. No law can force a worker to risk their life, especially if this risk comes from a boss's voluntary act. This was the beginning of our right to refuse. Steelworker victories stacked up. The definition of industrial disease widened in 62, thanks to a push from the workers at Union Carbide in Beauharnois. A few months later, the right to refuse dangerous work was first introduced in a contract of the steelworkers at Dominion Steel in Montreal. The first prevention committees started up in many workplaces. From Montreal to Pointe-Noire, from Trois-Rivières to Montreal East, from Sorel to Chibougamau, workers equipped themselves with the best tools for real, effective prevention. 1965, a rising star, René Lévesque, minister in Jean Lesage's Quebec government, made a film that was backed by the steelworkers. With a simple chalk, he shed a light on the power of real unionism. He helped activists grasp the importance of their work in vivid, concrete ways. The 60s ended with another victory. The right to refuse was confirmed at Nord-Métal. The next decade marked a time of change and OHS progress in Quebec. In bargaining and in laws, workers finally got to harvest what had been sown. A turning point came in 1970. A young 20-year-old worker died tragically at Gaspé Mine. A historic verdict came down. It was criminal negligence. In 75, arsenic poisonings at CCR in Montreal East led to the death of 2 workers. The case raised issues. The employer had previously denied the union access to information on dangerous substances. A coroner charged the company with criminal negligence and made a key recommendation. Workers must be informed about contaminants in their workplace. That same year, Quebec police probed 2 deaths at CO5 in Valleyfield. 2 more people were burned by sulfuric acid. Again, a coroner found criminal negligence due to the employer's omission. 1975, Beauharnois. Members of Local 5987 at Union Carbide began a memorable strike. It lasted 6 whole months. They fought for the right to refuse dangerous work. They held a 53-hour picket marathon, but the fight didn't end there. The year after the strike, the company set up a manganese crushing system. Result: dust emissions exceeded the allowed limit by more than 3 times. 11 brave workers invoked their right to refuse, negotiated a year earlier. They demanded safer conditions, loudly saying that their health is priceless. 1973, the steelworker Émile Boudreau, a pioneer in health and safety in Quebec, proposed a convention on the topic. In 1975, this became reality through the FTQ. Unfortunately, deaths kept rising. Chibougamau saw 43 fatal accidents in 13 years. These tragedies sparked reflection. 1976, the Baudry Public Inquiry shed light on working conditions in the asbestos mines of Thetford Mines. It laid the groundwork for the future Occupational Health and Safety Act. In 1976, health and safety was the main theme at the Steelworkers D5 annual conference, which welcomed a special guest, the new Quebec Premier, René Lévesque. Strikes, demands, and fights for the right to info and safety followed throughout the 70s. Whether at MLW Bombardier, Atlas Asbestos, Iron Ore, or Quebec Cartier, workers kept on making demands. They called for inquiries, better right to refuse, environmental tests, and scrapping the company physician system. In '79, Quebec voted the Occupational Health and Safety Act. The core of the act: eliminate danger at the source and get workers deeply involved in prevention. For steelworker Émile Boudreau, who penned parts of this law, this was the high point of many fierce battles. These efforts were intensified in '85 with a law to compensate injured or sick workers. The fight continued. April 1st, 1987, Murdochville. A devastating fire broke out at the mine. For 24 interminable hours, 50 steelworkers were trapped underground. Fear, weight, and hope all intertwined. July 92. A cenotaph was built in honor of the 18 miners lost at Métallos, forever sealing their memory in stone. That same year, Westray Mine in Nova Scotia collapsed, taking 26 lives. This led to the enactment of the Westray Act in 2004 on addressing corporate criminal liability. 1995, another major blow. In that single year, Quebec mourned 12 miners' death. The steelworkers ramped up their push for more safety. The CSST stepped up its game. It added new committees, granted more inspection powers, and set tougher penalties for negligent employers. Then, in 2013, the Lac Mégantic tragedy, caused by the railway industry's deregulation, struck our members directly. We fought to see liability fall on the company and not the workers. The steelworkers have a rich history, shaped by decades of persistence and the commitment of hundreds of thousands of workers. The changes they sparked didn't come about overnight. They're the result of strikes, negotiations, grievances, calls for investigations, changes to laws, and sometimes come after tragic deaths. Thanks to their steadfast efforts and the hard work of all these steelworkers, we can now rely on fundamental rights: the right to refuse, joint OHS committees, the right to access info on contaminants. Today, our legal framework is much stronger than 80 years ago. Since 2004, thanks to the Westray Act, authorities can file criminal negligence charges against companies or executives. 2021, an explosion occurred at Bois-Ouvrier-Beauceville. 3 steelworkers were tragically lost. Criminal charges were laid in 2023. Nothing will replace those lives, but justice is progressing. 60 years on, from when we first said no, steelworkers at Siemens in Trois-Rivières and the Westwood miners in Abitibi pushed it even further with a collective right to refuse. That can be directly exercised by the prevention rep. Our steelworkers' legacy lives on, always in action, never gone. The hard stand we took against Bill 59 was to protect the hard-won achievements made by past generations. Strengthened by 80 years of victories and solidarity, our vigilance remains sharp. Where bosses want only a good-looking prevention on paper, we'll make sure real prevention prevails. Where they try to downplay our health and safety committees, we'll turn them into strongholds. Everywhere our health and safety are at stake, we'll demand and achieve real transparency. We are the steelworkers, always on the front lines, resilient, unbroken, relentless, always ready to defend our rights. Every step we take, every victory we get reflects our determination. We are steelworkers. We are the history we've written together, and the history we keep writing together.